Welcome back to my channel. I am going to be going through a tutorial today on how to make a zipper pouch for pencils or markers or crayons, highlighters, those kinds of things, to continue with our back to school projects that we've been working on. I also want to go ahead and show you that I am also going to be working on the next tutorial for next week on covers for composition notebooks. I had shown this one earlier. I finally worked out the pattern for that. And so I'm going to be showing you a tutorial on these as well next week and how to vary those designs for different things. So go pick out some fabric and come back and join me, and let's make a zipper pouch today. Okay, for today's project, you are going to need a piece of lining fabric as well as an outside fabric. You want your outside fabric to be 12.5 by 10.5. If you are going to do a patchwork strip like I have on my bag, so if you want a little patchwork area, then you'll want the smaller size here for both of those. If you don't want the patchwork area and you just want one solid print for your bag, then you will want to just keep it as a 16.5 inch by 10.5 inch without your patchwork strip. So once you get those cut, so I'm doing the patchwork with mine, so I have the 12.5 by 10.5. So this one is my outside fabric, and then I have chosen the inside, which is going to be my lining fabric also. And what you're going to notice is that the one for the lining would be the full length if you are going to do no patchwork. And so you can see the difference in the size. If you are going to do patchwork, you're going to want to cut 5 2.5 inch squares, and you're going to piece those together very much the same way that we did when we did my 9-patch tutorial. So if you don't know how to make a 9-patch, you can refer back to that tutorial to see how to do that. But what you're going to notice is that once this is pieced, these will be identical in size, and we're just going to have the patchwork strips to be the difference in that little seam that's going to create the same size as your lining. So you have two choices, so you can decide based on the dimensions. You're also going to want either a fleece or batting. You can also use a foam, but just something to give the bag a little bit of stability. If you plan to quilt your bag, you would probably do better using a thin batting, but it'll make your bag not as firm as if you choose to use foam or the fleece. So you got a couple options there. Also, this is how your fabric is going to look when you originally cut it. So I want to show you that you're going to fold all 3 of these pieces. If you're not going to quilt it, then you won't have to do that until you get ready to quilt it. But you're going to fold those so that it's in half, and you want to mark the corners down here at the bottom to cut those out. And so if you look at these pieces that I've already done, I have done exactly that. They've just been folded in half, and I have measured to mark where I want my corners to go, and I've just gone ahead and cut out my corners. Now the reason I did not do it on this is because when I sew a pattern that's going to be quilted, this is going to stretch a little bit, and so it's better for me to trim that part once I'm done with the quilting on the top part of this. So that box is going to be 1.5 for your length of the box, and 1.25 inches will be the height here. And so you'll just literally, if you want to make a cardboard piece like I did, that's just easy, because then you can pin it down and just cut it out, and do the same on both corners, and then when you open it up, you'll have that look that you're looking for that. For your patchwork strip, when you're done piecing that together, it should come out to measure as a 2.5 by 10.5 inch strip, and that's why it's going to line up very well with your other pieces that you have. So you will need 5 2.5 inch blocks that you will sew in a line, And again, refer back to my 9-patch tutorial if you did not follow that or see that, and that will walk you through how to do these pieces of blocks side by side. You also last need a zipper because this is going to be a zipper bag. I always like to buy zippers that are longer. So I think this one is a 21-inch in length, but you could actually get one that's less than that. You just want to make sure that the zipper at least extends out past the bag just by about an inch at least, just so you have some leeway whenever you're putting it together. And those are all of the materials that you're going to need for this project. So gather what you need and let's go learn how to put it together. So our first step is going to be to piece together our blocks. Again, you can watch the tutorial for that. So once you have your 5 2.5-inch blocks pieced, we are going to attach those to our outside part of our bag. And so for mine, it's going to be this one. So I'm just going to choose how I want mine to look, and then I'm going to do right sides together. And you can pin these in place to kind of help you if you need pins, or you can clip them. You don't need a bunch, but you might want to just at least get a pin or two where you're going to start sewing, and maybe where you plan to end, and then maybe one in the center, just to give you something to kind of hold it in place as you get ready to sew. And so as I get to a place where I get the stitch coming up on the pin, then I will remove those instead of allowing my machine to go over those. Some people sew over their pins, but I prefer to remove mine as I go along. So we are going to just sew that down. Again, these are going to be a 1/4 inch seam, so very simple to follow. Don't forget to back stitch like we always do. This gives us a little stability in the bag. You may have to help it if you get too close to the edge to get it moving there. So once you do the top, you're going to go ahead and turn that around, and we want to also do the other end and do the same thing. So you just want to see how you want it positioned, what direction, and you're going to do right sides together. You're going to pin that side in place, and you're also going to sew that one together as well. Again, you can choose your preference to pin it or not, but I see that it does help just a little bit. And if you need to start your stitch a little farther away from here so that you have room to come forward without it getting hung up a little bit, you can start down here and then back stitch back up to where the end of the bag would be if you need to do that. Because sometimes it's just hard to get it moving if you're too close to that part of the needle. So you can come forward a few stitches and then you can take it back, and then it should be smooth for you to continue that. And that's how you will put your patchwork strips directly onto the front and back basically of your bag. So I do recommend that you go ahead and iron this down. And when you iron this, because it is going to be something that is at the top, I recommend one of two things. Either iron your seams toward the center part of your bag. So if your bag is going to be folded like this, then you're going to want your seams to go down on both sides. or you can actually open your seams as we've discussed in the past and open them and iron them. I prefer to leave mine down, and that's how I will iron mine. And then once you've got that done, you are going to come back for the next step, and that's going to be to quilt the top in whatever method you choose for putting a little quilt stitching. If you don't want quilt stitching, then you would skip that step and move on to putting your zipper in. Okay, so now you want to take the piece that you just finished with the patchwork, and you want to put your, whatever your choice is for either your foam or batting or fleece, you want that to be to the back side. I've added just a few pins at the top just to kind of keep it together, and then I have a couple down here at the bottom. You don't need a bunch of pins because this is going to give a little bit anyway, but now you're just going to choose how you want to quilt the bag. Notice this particular pattern has diagonal stripes, so I could quilt this using the diagonal direction for the stripes. I can also do stitch in the ditch with the seams of each of these blocks that I have and just come straight down like I did in the other one. You can also stitch across, and you can just measure, you know, how far you want your stitches to be. So you have a lot of leeway here with how you want to quilt the bag. And so just to show you some variation, I'm just going to do a diagonal stitch here and just kind of show you how you could do diagonal. And you don't have to do it on this part if you don't want to, but if you do, you can just follow the lines. So I would just lower my presser foot on this particular pattern, and I do like to back stitch. Some people don't, but you can back stitch. And so I would just take mine and literally follow the little path of this particular line. And I'm just going to stop when I get to this section and back stitch just a little bit there. And then I don't even have to do anything but turn this around and just continue to quilt. And I can just pick up my needle and just slide it over and go down into the next area where I want to quilt. So if I want to keep going with each line, I can do that. Or if I want more space, then I can just let it down at the next kind of peach colored line and just do the same thing again and just go all the way across to get that stitched. So you have several options. You can choose how you want yours to look and how you want to vary the pattern, and just follow it to the edge and just go slow if you need to. And then again, I can let my needle down and I can just rotate that back around, and I can move to the front of the next one that I want to do, which for this one, I'm just going to have to let my needle come up anyway to move it. And so I'm just going to continue. Notice I'm sewing on the front side of each one of the ones that is a peach color, and that's just going to give you that quilted look. We're just going to continue this all the way until we get every one of these done on this particular panel. So I'm just going to continue to quilt this, and you can come back and see the finished quilt in just a second. Okay, so once you get your quilting done, however you want to do it, if you rotated without taking it out of the machine, you are going to want to clip any stitches that connect between those. So for mine, I did diagonal stitching along just one side of some of the peach colored stripes, and then you'll notice that up here at the top I actually did some stitch in the ditch work, and so I have threads where I just turned my machine. I'm just going to clip those. You guys know I love a good pair of embroidery scissors for these kind of little detail clips. And then I also did a stitch in the ditch across the panel where it separated those other two seams. And so you have a couple of options, and you can even vary the quilting opportunities depending on what kind of look you want. And so I have diagonal stitching here, I have a stitch in the ditch here, and then I also had a stitch in a ditch method across here. So once you have this completely quilted, now you can go here and now cut out this section, and it will be a part that you don't need, and that will be how you will line up your two pieces next. So now we're going to the next step, and this is where we need to put in our zipper. So the first thing you want to do is get rid of the foot that is on there, and you want to replace it with a zipper foot. And you will notice that it has a left and a right option. So when you put on the zipper foot, I'm going to drop it down on the right side of my machine, because what I want to do is make sure that the actual teeth of the zipper can go up under this at the same time that I'm sewing. And if I start sewing and I have it on the wrong side, we'll just drop it down and we'll just move it to the other side. So when you get ready to put in a zipper, the first thing you want to do is make sure it's opening from the left if you are right-handed. You also are going to want to make sure that you put it in with the zipper tab away from you, so face down. So the right side of the zipper facing the right side of the outside of your fabric. And you're going to pin that in place or clip it. And then you also want to line up your lining fabric with its right side together with your bottom fabric. That will be the outside of your bag. And you are going to be sewing right along the edge here of this particular zipper. And so you'll just want to pin that or clip that, whichever is easiest. And you're just going to continue to line up the zipper with the top edge of that fabric, and then bring your lining fabric as a third layer. And just pin ever so often. And you will continue to do that all the way across. And don't worry about the zipper being longer. I'm doing this intentionally because it's going to be something that allows us to cut it off and not use the excess if we get to the end of it. So just continue to line up the edge of the zipper with the edge of the top of the bag and the edge of your lining until you get all the way to the end. And then we're going to sew this in place using our 1/4 inch seam. Now if you look at mine over here, this side is just a little bit too far over, and this side is just a little too shy. So make sure when you're lining it up that these are lined up pretty good. So another little tip for you is possibly clip or pin down here at the bottom to make sure those are in alignment before you start pinning up at the top, because you don't want to get your lining out of alignment for when you flip your bag. So you may have to come back and just double check. Just take your time getting everything straight and making sure everything is aligned. And it's pretty simple to put the zipper in. Don't be worried about how difficult a zipper might be. It's really a very simple process. And once you put in one or two, you might have to think about it a couple of minutes to make sure you get it right, but it becomes a pretty simple process and you can do it good every time. So I'm just going to continue to fix mine where it wasn't aligned, and then we're going to sew this first part on. So for this one, there's not a certain amount of seam allowance. You just want to be pretty close to the teeth of the zipper without getting it caught in your machine. And you can kind of feel that as you lay it on the machine because it's going to nest up against this piece of plastic, which is why you want it positioned where you can see that. So what you're going to notice is it looks like my zipper is in the way right here. And so if I want to sew next to it, this allows the zipper to be out of the way, but I can get my needle down right next to that right here, and you'll see that I can sew pretty close to the edge, because my zipper, if you can see the edge of my zipper here, my needle gets right beside that. So you're just going to lower your presser foot once you get that needle in, and you're going to sew a couple of stitches forward. Also, your zipper tab, make sure it's out of the way, because it will be an issue if not. So just make sure you keep an eye on that. But I keep it closed since I have space for this one. So go forward a few stitches, back stitch. As you come to a pin, you can just pull your pin out and just keep it aligned right next to that little zipper. And you can feel it, so you would know if it wasn't aligned. So backspace at the end. So when you pull this off of your machine, you're going to want to make sure that everything lines up the way it's supposed to look for your bag. So what we want to get visually is we want to be able to see that our zipper is encased in the bag, and we also want to make sure our lining is also encased on this side. And so once you've stitched that and you see what it looks like, then you can put an iron next to it and you can kind of press it down, and then you're going to top stitch along the top of your bag so that it has a neat complete finish. Okay, so now that I have the zipper in for one side, I'm going to leave the zipper foot on because it's not that big of a deal. And you can turn it so that it's the same direction so that the teeth will stay out of your way. So I want to top stitch over here. So now that we are actually done sewing, you can kind of see where that foot is going to stay right beside that zipper without going into the zipper and getting in your way. So that's on the left-hand side of my foot now. So I'm going to lower this, and I'm just going to do a top stitch right next to the top of the fabric edge, and that's just going to give me a nice finished look. And I would back stitch there at the beginning. And also, if you were making yours out of a fabric that had a different color in the background, like a base color, you can always use a different color thread. But because mine has so many different colors and it has a creamy color, my thread is just a whiter, creamier stitch, so that I don't have to worry about trying to match a red or a green and change it out, because I have so much going on in my pattern. So that just gives us a nice finished look along the edge of our zipper. So we are going to repeat exactly what we did with putting this side in, and we're going to do the other side. Now, what I do want you to realize is that this time, this is going to be the outside of the bag. And so this was the top out here, so it also needs to now be the top up here. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing that I did. I'm going to keep it aligned, and I'm going to start here, and I'm going to sandwich my zipper now in between both. Notice that my lining is going to be right sides together on the back, but the zipper is once again sandwiched between the right side and the right side. It's just going to look different because we've already put it on one side. Again, you just want to keep that sandwich aligned at the top. and put a few pins just to help position that in place. And we're going to do exactly the same thing that we just did. And again, when you finish this one, you're also going to top stitch that so that you have uniformity on both sides of your zipper. Just going to put one more here in the end, and we'll be ready to stitch this one down. So again, I'm just going to put this one where the actual zipper itself is to the left so that I can get my needle really close to it. I am going to back stitch when I start and stop. I'm going to remove pins as I go. And again, if you're close to that zipper, you're going to be able to feel that to be able to stay aligned as well. So that's going to help you keep it pretty aligned and straight. So now is going to be a very important thing to do, and that is to make sure that we go right here and we go ahead and make sure we have this zipper opened, because once we start to close our bag up, we are not going to be able to get into our bag if we have the zipper closed. So we want to make sure that we actually go ahead and get this opened before we sew the rest of our bag. So you'll want to, you can go about halfway and that'll be fine, but you will want to have your zipper open once you finish this process. So now what you're going to notice here, so we top stitched on this side, we need to top stitch on this side, and so that's the next thing we want to do. And so you can actually flip your bag at this point so that you can see everything. And you can see now that it's starting to come together. And because we haven't cut the zipper yet, we can unzip it all the way, and that helps us to kind of really open it up and get this kind of pressed really good and go ahead and top stitch without having anything that hinders us from getting a good stitch or catching anything else in the seam. And so I'm just going to give this a good press, and then we're going to top stitch this one just like we did the previous. And putting that iron to that just kind of helps get it pretty uniform for you so that you don't catch any of your fabric in the zipper when you do that top stitch. And that top stitch helps keep the fabric out of your bag when you open and close it as well. So now we're just going to line this back up over here and just do our top stitch on this side. So notice the zipper is over here now. I can change my foot, or I can flip it and I can put it back on this side so that I put the zipper to the outside. So you can flip it around or you can move your foot. So just make sure the zipper is to the outside of where you're going to be putting your top stitch. So I'm going to lower the foot. I am going to back stitch. And again, I'm just going to go right on top of what I just made and stay right there at the edge of my fabric. And just make a top stitch to make it nice and uniform. So now we have the makings of our bag. So you're going to notice we've got our zipper in, we've got it top stitched. So now we've got to work on sewing our bag on the sides. And so the main thing that's most important is you want to make sure your zipper is open at this point. Now we're going to flip our bag the wrong way, and then we're going to separate also our lining as well from the front of our bag. So you're going to have one section of the bag that is just the lining, and another section of the bag that will just be this part. And so what we're going to do is we're going to sew this side of our bag all the way along this side, and we're going to sew this part of the bag all the way along this side. And that's going to hide all of our seams to the inside of our bag. And then we're going to do the same thing up here. We're going to line up this side of our bag also, and we're going to sew this section, and then we're going to flip it over here, and we're only going to sew this side seam of our lining. But when we do that, we're going to want to put a couple of pins to remind us not to sew one little section of the lining, because we're going to need a way to turn our bag out when we're done, and then we'll stitch this up at the end. Okay, so now I'm just going to sew this side seam here. Again, you'll want to back stitch and remove any pins as you go, keeping that 1/4 inch seam. Okay, you're going to flip your bag around, and now we're going to do our other side as well. So just make sure you have your corners lined up correctly. You can hold it with a couple of pins to keep it in place. And continue. When I get close to my zipper, I'm going to go ahead there and back stitch. So now the sides of the front part of my bag are sewn. So the next thing I want to do is box in the corners. So I'm going to pull my corners out just like this, and you can open up the seam if you want. And we're just going to sew straight across in a straight line, and that's going to give us that boxed corner that we need. Again, line it up on that 1/4 inch seam, back stitch, and do the same thing on the other side and box the corner. Again, you just pull the sides out and just align the top and bottom. You can open that seam up if you want. And then we're going to sew straight across, 1/4 inch seam, back stitch when you start and stop. Okay, so now we need to do the same thing with our lining, but remember For the lining, one side needs to be left open about a couple of inches so that we have room to flip our bag when we finish. So it doesn't matter which side, you'll just pick one side where you'll do that. Again, you can just hold that in place with a couple of pins if you need to. Again, when you get close to your zipper, you can backstitch. So for this side, we can line up the ends, and we're just going to sew up part of the way here. So I'm just going to put a pin where I want to stop. And then I'm just going to put another pin where I want to continue. And that just reminds me to leave this little section open so I have a way to turn it when I finish. So we're going to backstitch when we get to that pin, and then we can just slide it, staying on that 1/4 inch seam until we reach the next pin. And then we're going to backstitch here as well, keeping it aligned. And then again, we're just going to follow that all the way up. When you get close to your zipper, you will just backstitch. And then last, we're going to box these corners also. And then we can turn our bag once we get those done. So we're doing it the same way, just when you turn it this way, just pull those out this direction. Line those ends up. You can, these are thin seams, so you don't necessarily have to open them if you don't want to. I'm just going to sew straight across. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. Just pull those out, make a straight line, make sure it's even there. And remember, we did leave this space open so you can kind of clip both the top and bobbin threads so that that opening will be easy to get to. So you can go ahead and clip those. So now we can pull our bag through the opening that we just left in the lining. And so when we pull our bag through, very carefully, this is going to hide all of our seams for the bag. So no one's going to see anything except the lining when they open the bag. And you won't have any raw edges on your seams the way that we put this together. And just go slow so that you don't tear your lining. Remember, you don't want to pull those stitches, so just maneuver it as easy as you can. Just slowly turning it until it's right side out. Sometimes you just have to be patient. And see, now you can see you have an open zipper, so now you'll be able to get your hand in that zipper and pull it through the rest of the way a lot easier. Now what you're going to notice is that we have our lining showing right now on the outside, but that's an easy fix, because when we flip our bag the right way, the outside of our bag is what's going to show, and the lining is going to be on the inside of our bag. So before we do that, once we make sure it's going to be right, we can go ahead here and you can use your iron and go ahead and make sure your seam stays aligned, and we can close up this part of our bag before we flip it out the rest of the way. And so just make sure you fold in that 1/4 inch on both sides here, and just kind of lay that out so you can get a good press so that those stay inside. And sometimes you can do both sides to kind of help it. And so once you have that, now this is where for your lining, if you wanted to have the thread match, because this is mostly red, you could. But because I'm doing a tutorial and you guys are going to be looking at how it's done, I'll just leave mine white. But you could change your thread here to match the red so it blends. But you're just going to come right along the edge of this fold, and you're just going to seal the bag the rest of the way with a little back stitch. And you'll just close it up right along that edge where that fold is. And that basically just closes the lining for us. And so if I had red thread, this would be blending in. But because I want you guys to see how that looks, I'm just going to leave the white. But basically you just sew very close to the edge just to seal that up. And now I can actually flip the bag all the way out. And when I do that, you're going to notice that we have our bag with the correct part on the outside, and then we have our lining on the inside, and you can pop out those corners down at the bottom. So now you can see how nice those boxed corners look. It gives it a really nice uniform look. You can do it for both your lining and your outside of your bag. And so once you get all of those corners boxed, you'll have a bag that'll stand up and that will zip. And what you can do is, now that you've got all these wrinkles, is you can just lay your bag. I always tuck in the bottom where my box is to create the fold here, and then press it. And what that's going to do is help your bag to hold that shape that it needs to stand up. And this is going to also help you iron out all of those wrinkles that we've made in turning it. And I like to do both sides. And so that way, once it's ironed and you stand it up, those boxed corners now look really good and they're going to stand up, and that's going to be a lot easier. Now you can add a zipper pull to your zipper if you want. You can also use the option of making a zipper tab if you want zipper tabs. But you have lots of options. But basically, this is the process to put your bag together, and you have a nice little pencil pouch that you can carry your school supplies in. Be sure to like and subscribe to my channel, and if you have any questions, let me know. And also, there will be links to other tutorials and to resources that you can use. Thank you for joining us, and come back.